Hello class, welcome to the week 3 unit, and in this week we're going to talk about the idea of a loop. And in the case of Python, there are actually two main loops that you can have, one of which is called a for loop, which is more technically referred to as fixed repetition, and the other loop, which we'll also take a look at during the course of this week, is often referred to informally as a while loop, and that's referred more technically as a conditional repetition. But in this first part, we're only going to be focusing on the idea of a for loop in which we get the computer to repeat some sort of task some fixed number of times or some set number of times. And from sort of a more conceptual standpoint, the whole idea behind a loop is it's a single task or a series of tasks that you get the computer to repeat. Um, and that can have all sorts of there's all sorts of things that you can do using loops. In fact, loops are extremely versatile, especially when you start dealing with data analysis. And we'll take a look at some of that versatility a little bit later on in the class. But for now, I just want to give you guys sort of an initial bearing on how to set up a loop in Python, how exactly they work, and the behaviors that you can expect from a loop when you go to actually use it. So just starting off, we have a super simple loop here, and one of the other reasons why it's called a for loop is because it uses the word for here, F-O-R, and this is primarily a legacy thing because this is something that older programming languages have used, such as C, and it's just a convention that has been just adopted by every other programming language that has come out since then. So setting this up in Python, we have for and then I, which this is actually a variable, and we'll talk more about the significance of this variable in the next segment, but for now let's just focus on the basic setup here. So yes, for some variable name, that can be anything as long as it's a valid variable name, and then the word in, and then followed by range, parentheses, and then a number inside the parentheses. And there's actually three different variations of this. This is demonstrating range by putting just a single number inside the range function, or what's referred to as the range function. But we're going to take a look at some other variations that involve putting two different values in for the range function and also even three different values in the range function. But for now, we're just going to focus on just one value being put into the range function. And at the very end of that, we have a colon. So again, just like if statement, the colon at the very end of there is absolutely crucial. The program will not run at all if that colon is not present. So make sure that colon is at the end of the for loop or at the beginning of the for loop, which is again illustrated here on line 2. And just like with an if statement, which had a colon at the end of it, the if statement also had some sort of indentations or some set of indented statements that appeared directly below it. And a for loop has a similar setup here. So for loop also has a colon at the very end of it, so it also requires that there be some sort of indented statement directly below it. And in the case of an if statement, the indentation was something that the computer was only going to do if the conditions spelled out in the if statement were satisfied. The indentation with a loop, however, has a different functionality to it. In the case of a loop, if you have an indented statement here, then this is the task or set of tasks that the computer is going to run through multiple times. And in the case of having range with just a single number in here, this basically tells the computer how many times we want it to repeat that set task. So for I in range 10, that basically tells the computer that I want this indented or the set of indented statements run 10 times, and it will run through that indented statement 10 times, and then once it's done with that, then it will continue onward and proceed with whatever statements that might appear afterwards. So in the case of this specific program, for I in range 10 means that we're going to be running this indented statement 10 times. In the case, we only have one indented statement, which is just going to print out the word hi to the console over here. And then below that on line 5, we have another print statement, but notice how this is unindented. And the same indentation rules apply with an if statement. If you have the indentation has to be consistent, but if you have an unindented statement, then that unindented statement is not considered to be part of the if statement, and it's also not considered to be part of a loop. So that means that anything that's unindented, in the case of a loop, this statement will run only as often as it appears. And since this print statement appears only once, then the computer is only going to run this print statement on line 5 because it is not indented, and therefore it is not considered to be part of the loop that we have up here. So in this case, in the case of this program, for I in range 10, the computer will print out hi 10 times, and then once it's done with that, then it'll proceed onward to run this statement on line 5 because it's unindented, and that will entail just printing out by. So if we want to get some sort of verification that actually works, and we can see we do in fact achieve that same result. And if you want to, you can go through and count this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, mouse malfunction, 9, 10, and then you see that the 10 highs here corresponds to the 10 that we have just in the range function here. And if you're feeling kind of I don't know, silly or adventurous, then you can sort of play around with the number that you put in the range function. So if I wanted to, I could print out high 1,000,000 times, although I'm not going to run that because I like it when my computer is functioning when I'm trying to record something. But that is something that you could do, and if your computer has the memory and processing power to handle it, then it will run this indented statement 1,000,000 times, and it will do that without question. So there's really no theoretical upper limit to what you can put in the range function. Just keep in mind that your computer, if it doesn't have the resources to accomplish that, it may not be able to complete the task that you set out for it. One other thing that we should mention, excuse me, one other thing that we should mention is order here is very important. So let's say I take this print statement that was originally unindented, and now I'll make it part of the loop here. So now this is going to beg the question, what exactly is going to appear in the Python console? And more importantly, what is the exact order on which these statements are going to be run? So you may remember back in week 1, we were talking about how whatever appears toward the top is going to be run before anything that appears below it. So whatever is at a line that's closer to the top is going to have priority over what appears below it. And the same holds true for a loop. Even though we're repeating some set of tasks, there's a specific order that the computer will complete those tasks in. So in this case, it's going to first print out high. When it goes through the first cycle of the loop, it's going to first print out high. Then it's going to print out by. Then it's going to go to the next cycle of the loop, print high, and then print by, again in that specific order, just working from the top down. Go to the next cycle of the loop, print high, and then by again. So you can see it's going to alternate here. It's going to print high, and then by, then high, and then by. It's going to continue that process until it's completed 10 times. And if we want to get some verification of that result, we can see, if we go through and count all that, there should in fact be 10 times in which this pattern alternates. So high, then by, and then so on and so forth until the computer completes that task this many number of times, this number here in the range function. So that's going to do it for this first segment, sort of a first look at for loops. And in the next segment, we're going to explore a couple things. One is what happens when you put two numbers in the range function, and also what exactly is going on with this variable here that appears between the word for and in. So that's what we're going to explore in the next segment. So with that, I will see you all there.